Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more ancient lore. Today we are diving back into the mind of Dante. This is the Divine Comedy. We are into Paradise now. We are going to be picking up at Canto 5 when going through 11. We will read them, we will discuss on the other end. If you get confused, if you want to start at the beginning, the links are in the corner up here and down below, along with the link to the source material. Let's dive in. Paradiso, Canto 5. If, in the heat of love, I flame upon thee, beyond the measure that on earth is seen, so that the valor of thine eyes I vanquish, marvel not that, marvel thou not thereat, for this proceeds from perfect sight, which, as it apprehends to the good, apprehended moves its feet. Well I perceive how is already shining into thine intellect the eternal light, that only seen enkindles always love. And if some other things your love seduced, 'tis nothing but a vestige of the same, ill understood, which there is shining through. Thou fain wouldst know if, with another service for broken vow, can such return be made as to secure the soul from further claim. This canto thus did Beatrice begin, and as a man who breaks not off his speech, continued thus her holy argument. The greatest gift that in his largesse God creating made, and unto his own goodness nearest conformed, and that which he doth prize most highly is the freedom of the will, wherewith the creatures of intelligence both all and only were and are endowed. Now wilt thou see if thence thou reasonest the high worth of a vow, and if he made so that when thou consentest, God consents. For closing between God and man the compact, a sacrifice is of this treasure made, such as I say, and made by its own act. What can be rendered then as compensation? Thinkest thou to make good use of what thou'st offered? What gains ill-gotten thou wouldst do good deed. Now, art thou certain of the greater point, but because Holy Church in this dispenses, which seems against the truth which I have shown thee, behoove thee still to sit a while at table, because the solid food which thou hast taken require further aid for thy digestion. Open thy mind to that which I reveal, and fix it there within, for 'tis not knowledge, and having heard without retaining it, in the essence of this sacrificing two things, convene together, and the one is that of which 'tis made, and the other 'tis the agreement. This last for evermore is cancelled not unless complied with, and concerning this with such precision has above been spoken. Therefore it was enjoined upon the Hebrews to offer still, though sometimes what was offered might be commuted, as thou oughtst to know. The other, which is known to thee as matter, may well indeed be such that one errs not for it for other matter be exchanged. But let none shift the burden on his shoulder, at his arbitrament, without the turning both of the yellow white and of the yellow key. And every permutation seems as foolish, if in the substitute the thing relinquished, as the 4 is in 6 be not contained. Therefore whatever thing has so great weight and value that it drags down every balance cannot be satisfied with other spending. Let mortals never take a vow in jest. Be faithful and not blind in doing that, as Jephthah was in his first offering, whom more beseemed to say, I have done wrong, than do worse by keeping. And as foolish thou, the great leader of the Greeks, wilt find, whence once Iphigenia, her fair face, and made for her both wise and simple weep, who heard such kind of worship spoken of. Christians, be ye more serious in your movements, be ye not like a feather at each wind, and think not every water washes you. Ye have the Old and the New Testament, and the pastor of the church who guideth you. Let this suffice you unto your salvation. If evil appetite cry aught else to you, be ye as men, and not as silly sheep, so that the Jew among you may not mock you. Be ye not as the lamb that doth abandon its mother's milk, and frolicsome and simple, combats at its own pleasure with itself. Thus Beatrice to me, even as I write it, then all desireful, turned herself again to that part where the world is most alive. Her silence and her change of countenance, silence imposed upon my eager mind, that had already in advance new questions. And as an arrow that upon the mark strikes ere the bowstring quiet hath become, so did we speed into the second realm. My lady there so joyful I beheld, as into the brightness of that heaven she entered. More luminous thereat the planet grew. And if the star itself was changed and smiled, what became I, who by my nature am exceedingly mutable in every guise? As in a fish pond which is pure and tranquil, the fishes draw to that which from without comes in such fashion that their food they deem it. So I beheld more than 1,000 splendors, drawing towards us, and in each was heard, Lo, this is she who shall increase our love. And as each one was coming unto us, full of beatitude, the shade was seen by the effulgence clear that issued from it. Think, reader, if what here is just beginning, no farther should proceed, how thou wouldst have an agonizing need of knowing more. And of thyself thou wilt see how I from these was in desire of hearing their conditions, and as they unto mine eyes were manifest. O thou well-born, unto whom grace concedes, to see the thrones of the eternal triumph over, or ever yet, the warfare be abandoned. With light that through the whole heaven is spread, kindled are we, and hence, if thou desirest to know of us, at thine own pleasure sate thee. Thus, by someone among those holy spirits was spoken, and by Beatrice, speak securely, and believe them, even as gods. Well I perceive how thou dost nest thyself in thine own light, and drawest it from thine eyes, because they coruscate when thou dost smile. But know not who thou art, nor why thou hast, spirit august, thy station in the sphere, that veils itself to men in alien rays. This said I in direction of the light which first had spoken to me, whence it became by far more lucent than it was before, even as the sun that doth conceal himself by too much light when heat has worn away the tempering influence of the vapors dense. By greater rapture thus concealed itself in its own radiance, the figure saintly, and thus close enfolded answered me, in fashion as the following canto sings. And so ends Canto 5, and here we get something interesting. It's telling you here that the most prized thing in creation is free will. And I absolutely believe with that. I believe that God uses your free will to enact His will, and that He has contingency plans for whatever you decide, and whichever way it goes, He still uses it for the good. So there's that. But it also tells you that it is better to not make a vow than to make a vow and to break it. And that is absolutely true. You should be extremely careful what you promise to do. You don't have to make a promise, right? You never have to say, I promise you, I swear, I vow. You never have to say those things. But if you do, then you should mean them. You should absolutely hold them. You should hold them above what is expected from you. That is a truth. And it's also telling you here that the reason that there is this heaven where these people are bound is because they believe that there is this heaven by which they are bound. And that is also a very interesting thing. It definitely goes against the Catholic doctrine. It goes against Christian doctrine. It even goes against Jewish doctrine. And so it is very interesting to see that he made it in here. Canto 6. After that, Constantine, the eagle turned, against the course of heaven which it had followed behind the ancient who Lavinia took. 200 years and more the bird of God in the extreme of Europe held itself near to the mountains whence it issued first. And under shadows of the sacred plumes it governed there the world from hand to hand, and changing thus upon mine own alighted. Caesar I was, and am Justinian, who by the will of primal love I feel, took from the laws the useless and redundant. And ere unto the work I was attended, one nature to exist in Christ, not more, believed, and with such face was I contented. But blessed Agapetus, he who was the supreme pastor, to the faith sincere pointed me out the way by words of his. Him I believed, and what was his assertion I see now clearly, even as thou seest each contradiction to be false and true. As soon as with the church I moved my feet, God in his grace it pleased with this high task to inspire me, and I gave me wholly to it. And to my Belisarius I commended the arms, to which was heaven's right hand so enjoined. It was a signal that I should repose. Now here to the first question terminates my answer, but the character thereof constrains me to continue with a sequel, in order that thou see with how great reason men move against the standard sacrosanct, both who appropriate and who oppose it. Behold, how great a power has made it worthy of reverence, beginning from the hour when Pallas died to give it sovereignty. Thou knowest it made in Alba its abode 300 years and upward, till at last the 3 and 3 fought for it yet again. Thou knowest what it achieved from Sabine wrong, down to Lucretia's sorrow in 7 kings, overcoming round about the neighboring nations. Thou knowest what it achieved, borne by the Romans, illustrious against Brennus, against Furus, against the other princes and confederates. Torquatus, thence in Quincintus, who from the locks unkempt was named. Deci and Fabi received the fame I willingly embalm. It struck to earth the pride of the Arabians, who, following Hannibal, had passed across the Alpine ridges, Po, from which thou glidest. Beneath it triumphed while they yet were young, Pompey and Scipio, and to the hill beneath which thou wast born it bitter seemed. Then, near unto the time when heaven had willed to bring the whole world to its mood serene, did Caesar by the will of Rome assume it. What it achieved from Var unto the Rhine, Isere beheld, and Saone beheld the Seine, and every valley whence the Rhone is filled. What it achieved when it had left Ravenna and leaped the Rubicon was such a flight that neither tongue nor pen could follow it. Round towards Spain it wheeled its legions, then towards Durazzo, and Pharsalia smote that to the Khalid Nile was felt the pain. And Tandros and the Simios, where it started, it saw again, and there where Hector lies, and ill for Ptolemy, then roused itself. From thence it came like lightning upon Juba, then wheeled itself again into your west, where the Pompeian clarion it heard. From what it wrought with the next standard-bearer, Brutus and Cassius howl in hell together, and Modena and Perica dolent were. Still doth the mournful Cleopatra weep because thereof who, fleeing from before it, took from the adder sudden and black death. With him it ran even to the Red Sea shore. With him it placed the world in so great peace that unto Janus was his temple closed. But what the standard that has made me speak achieved before and after should achieve throughout the mortal realm that lies beneath it, becometh in appearance mean and dim, if in the hands of the third Caesar seen with eye unclouded and affection pure, because the living justice that inspires me granted it in the hand of him I speak of, the glory of doing vengeance for its wrath. Now here attend to what I answer thee. Later it ran with Titus to do the vengeance upon the vengeance of the ancient sin. And when the tooth of Lombardy had bitten the Holy Church, Then underneath its wings did Charlemagne the victorious, succor her. Now hast thou power to judge of such as those whom I accused above, and of their crimes, which are the cause of all your miseries. To the public standard one of the yellow lilies opposes, and the other claims it for a party, so that it is hard to see which sins the most. Let, let, let the Ghibellines ply their handicraft beneath some other standard, for this ever ill follows he who it in justice parts. And let not this new Charles ever strike it down, he and his Guelphs, but let him fear the talons that from a nobler lion stripped the fell. Already oft times the sons have wept the father's crime, and let him not believe that God will change a scutcheon for the lilies. This little planet doth adorn itself with the good spirits that have active been, that fame and honor might come after them. And whensoever the desires mount thither, thus deviating, must perforce the rays of the true love less vividly mount upward. But in commiseration with our wages, with our desert is portion of our joy, because we see them neither less nor greater. Herein doth living justice sweeten so affection in us, that for evermore it cannot warp to any iniquity. Voices diverse make up sweet melodies, so that in this life of ours the seats diverse render sweet harmony among these spheres. And in the compass of this present pearl shineth the sheen of Romeo, of whom the grand and beauteous works was ill rewarded. But the provincials who against him wrought, they have not laughed, and therefore ill goes he who makes his hurt of the good deeds of others. 4 daughters, and each one of them a queen, had Raymond Berenger, and this for him did Romeo, a poor man and a pilgrim. And then malicious words incited him to summon to a reckoning this just man, who rendered to him 7 and 5 for 10. Then he departed poor and stricken in years, and if the world could know the heart he had in begging bit by bit his livelihood, though much it laud him, it would laud him more. And so we end Canto 6 and a history lesson, right? That's what this one is. We've had several of those going along where we've learned the history of some things, and it does not appear that there's anything deeper esoterically than a recounting of these peoples and the achievements that they have. It's talking mostly about the achievements of the Romans, right? From before Caesar, through Caesar, and up until the end. And so it is interesting to note the Romeo here. I'm pretty sure that this was at least a couple hundred years before Shakespeare. And so that's interesting. Like I don't recall any other story that featured Romeo other than Romeo and Juliet. So if there is something, y'all let me know down below. Canto 7. Hosanna sanctus Deus Sabaoth. Super illustrians clauretate tua felicia signis aurum malahos. In this wise to his melody returning this substance, upon which a double light doubles itself, was seen by me to sing. And to their dance this and the others moved, and in the manner of swift hurrying sparks veiled themselves from me with a sudden distance. Doubting was I, and saying, tell her, within me, tell her, saying, tell my lady, who slakes my thirst with her sweet effluences. And yet that reverence which doth lord it over the whole of me, only by bee and ice, bowed me again like unto one who drowses. That's got to be Beatrice. Short while did Beatrice endure me thus, and she began lighting me with a smile, such as would make one happy in the fire. According to infallible advisement, after what manner a just vengeance justly could be avenged, has put thee upon thinking. But I will speedily thy mind unloose, And do thou listen, for these words of mine, of a great doctrine, will a present make thee. By not enduring on the power that wills, curbed for his good that man who never was born, damning himself, damned all his progeny, whereby the human species down below lay sick for many centuries in great error, till to descend it pleased the word of God. To where the nature with from its own Maker estranged itself, he joined to him in person by the sole act of his eternal love. Now, unto what is said direct thy sight. This nature, when united to its Maker, such as created, was sincere and good, but by itself alone was banished forth from paradise, because it turned aside out of the way of truth and of its life. Therefore the penalty the cross held out, if measured by the nature thus assumed, none ever yet with so great justice stung, and none was ever of so great injustice, considering who the person was that suffered, within whom such a nature was contracted. From one act therefore issued things diverse. To God and to the Jews one death was pleasing. Earth trembled at it, and the heaven was open. It should no longer now seem difficult to thee, when it is said that a just vengeance by a just court was afterward avenged. But now do I behold thy mind entangled from thought to thought within a knot, from which with great desire it waits to free itself. Thou sayest, well, discern what I hear, but it is hidden from me why God willed for our redemption only this one mode. Buried remaineth, brother, this decree unto the eyes of every one whose nature is in the flame of love not yet adult. Verily, inasmuch as at this mark one gazes long, and little is discerned, wherefore this mode was worthiest, will I say. Goodness divine, which from itself doth spurn all envy, burning in itself, so sparkles that the eternal beauties it enfolds. Whatever from this immediately distills has afterwards no end, for never removed is its impression when it sets its seal. Whatever from this immediately rains down is wholly free, because it is not subject unto the influences of novel things. The more conformed thereto, the more it pleases. For the best ardor that irradiates all things, and that most like itself is most vivacious. With all of these things has advantage been the human creature, and if one be wanting from his nobility, he needs must fall. 'Tis sin alone which doth disenfranchise him, and render him unlike the good supreme, so that he little with its light is blanched. And to his dignity no more returns, unless he fill up where transgression empties with righteous pain for criminal delights. Your nature, when it sinned so utterly in its own seed, out of these dignities, even out of paradise was driven. Nor could itself recover, if thou notest, with niceless subtility, by any way, except by passing one of these two fords. Either that God, through clemency alone, has pardon granted, or that man himself had satisfaction for his folly made. Fix now thine eye deep into the abyss of the eternal counsel, to my speech as far as may be fastened steadfastly. Man in his lamentations had not power to satisfy, not having power to sink in his humility, obeying men. Far as he, disobeying, thought to rise, and for this reason man has been from power of satisfying by himself excluded. Therefore, it God behooved in his own ways man to restore unto his perfect life, I say in one, or else in both of them. But since the action of the doer is so much more grateful, as it more presents the goodness of the heart from which it ensues, goodness divine, that doth imprint the world, has been contented to proceed by each in all its ways to lift you up again. Nor twixt the first day and the final night such high and such magnificent proceedings, by one or by the other was or shall be. For God more bounteous was gift was himself to give, to make man able to uplift himself, than if only of himself had pardoned. And all the other modes were insufficient for justice were it not the Son of God himself had humbled to become incarnate. Now, to fill fully each desire of thine, return I to elucidate one place, in order that thou there mayest seest as I do. Thou sayest, I see the air, I see the fire, the water, and the earth, all their mixtures come to corruption, and short while endure. And these things, notwithstanding, were created. Therefore, if that which I have said were true, they should have been secure against corruption. The angels, brother, and the land sincere in which thou art created may be called just as they are in their entire existence. But all the elements which thou hast named, and all those things which out of them are made, by a created virtue are informed. Created was the matter which they have. Created was the informing influence within these stars that go about, that round about them go. The soul of every brood and of the plants by its potential temperament attracts the ray and motion of the holy lights. But your own life immediately inspires supreme beneficence and enamors it so with herself and evermore desires her. And thou from this mayest argue furthermore your resurrection, if thou think again how human flesh was fashioned at that time, when the first parents, both of them, were made. And so ends Canto 7. It's an interesting number for it to end on, too. And here we have a little bit of a problem. Problem for me, not necessarily for you, but I think that it's fairly obvious. This is asking a very important question. One of the most important questions that you can possibly ask. What is the required sacrifice for forgiveness for sin? How come it took waiting until 2024 years ago or so, and somebody dying to be forgiven for sin? And my answer to that is it didn't. It's a very simple answer, right? My belief is the only thing that was ever required for you to be forgiven for sin was your sin. Not a goat, not a cow, not a chicken, not a person. And so, every blood sacrifice that was made for the remission of sin, therefore, was terrible. Like, bald-faced on its face. The one possible exception of that was Jesus sacrificing himself to put an end to the human sacrifice. And then we built a whole religion, or groups of religions, about the human sacrifice. And we're just fine with accepting that, and that's all it takes for us to be purified and sacrosanct. I'm not saying that confessing your sins and being forgiven makes you pure and holy. I will never say that, because you were still mortal. You're in the flesh suit, so you still have your temptations and your lessons to learn, no matter where you are on your journey. But I'm going to offer you a story, and you're going to be familiar with this story. There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger son, in his haste, decided that he wanted to get his inheritance and go out into the world with it and to make his own way. And he didn't want to wait for the old man to die, and he didn't want to do the things that were required for him to be part of the inheritance. But the old man said okay, and he gave him his half of the inheritance, and he sent him on his way. And the young man, he squandered his inheritance. He went out into the world and he did all kinds of things. He gambled and he drank and he caroused and he did all kinds of things wrong. And then one day, the old man, he's out in the field and he's working in his field, and he looks, and coming over the hill, he sees his son. Now, his son has had enough of his life. He's out there, he's tired of carousing, and he's tired of drinking, and he's tired of gambling, and he's wasted all of his money. And he said, you know what? My father's servants are treated better than I am, so I will go back and I will humble myself before my father. I will say to him, Father, I am sorry. I have done what was wrong, and I ask you to take me back. But the father, he's sitting there and he's in his field and he's working like he was doing the whole time that his son was out carousing. And he looks and he sees coming over the crest of this hill is his son. And his immediate response is absolute joy. He doesn't wait for his son to say, I'm sorry. He doesn't wait for his son to sacrifice a cow. He doesn't say, you can't come back here unless you do this specific thing. He says, welcome home, my son. Let's kill the fatted calf and celebrate because you have returned. That right there is the sum of the gospel. That is the entirety of what God wants in your life. All of it. Right there. And then you've got the older son, and he's bitter about it because he stayed there and he did what he was supposed to do. But it doesn't matter because his son has come home. That's where we're going to leave that. All right, next up. Paradiso, Canto 8. The world used in its peril to believe that the fair Cypria's delirious love rayed out in the third epicycle turning. Wherefore not only unto her paid honor of sacrifices and of votive cry, the ancient nations in the ancient error. But both Dione honored they and Cupid, that as her mother this one, as her son, and said that he had to sit in Dido's lap. And they from her, whence I beginning took the denomination of the star that woos the sun, now following, now in front. I was not ware of our ascending to it, but of our being in it gave full faith. My lady, whom I saw more beauteous grow, and as within a flame a spark is seen, and as within a voice discerned, when one is steadfast and one comes and goes. Within that light I beheld another lamp, move in a circle speeding more or less, methinks in measure of their inward vision. From a cold cloud descended never winds, or visible or not so rapidly, they would not laggard and impeded seem. To any one who had those lights divine seen come towards us, leaving the gyration, begun at first in the high seraphim, and behind those that most in front appeared, sounded, Hosanna, so that never since to hear again was I without desire. Then unto us more nearly one approached, and it alone began, we all are ready unto thy pleasure that thou joy in us. We turn around with the celestial princes, one gyre and one gyration and one thirst. To whom thou in the world of old didst say, ye, who, intelligent, the third heaven are moving, and so are full of love, to pleasure thee a little quiet will not less be sweet. After these eyes of mine themselves had offered unto my lady reverently, and she, content and certain of herself, had made them, back to the light they turned, which so great promise made of itself, and say, who art thou? Was my voice imprinted with great affection. Oh, how and how much I beheld it grow with the new joy that superadded was unto its joys as soon as I had spoken. Thus changed, it said to me, the world possessed me short time below, and if it had been more, much evil will be which would not have been. My gladness keepeth me concealed from thee, which rayeth around me, and doth hide me, like as a creature swathed in its own silk. Much didst thou love me, and thou hadst good reason, for had I been below, I should have shown thee somewhat beyond the foliage of my love, that left-hand margin which doth bathe itself in Rhone, which is mingled with the Sorgue, for me for its lord awaited in due time, and that horn of Ausonia, which is towned with Bari and with Gaeta and Catona, whence Tronto and Verde in the sea disgorge, already flashed upon my brow the crown of that dominion which the Danube waters. After the German after the German borders it abandons. And beautiful Trinacria, with that is murky twixt Pancio and Peloro, on the gulf which greatest scythe from Eurus doth receive. Not through Typhoeus, but through nascent sulphur, would have awaited her own monarch still, through me from Charles descended and from Rudolph. If the evil lordship that exasperates ever the subject populations had not moved Palermo to the outcry of "Death! Death!" And if my brother could but this foresee, the greedy poverty of Catalonia straight would he flee, that it might not molest him. For verily 'tis needful to provide, through him or other, so that on his bark, already frightened, no more fright be placed. His nature, which from liberal covetous descended, such a soldiery would need as should not care for hoarding in a chest. Because I do believe the lofty joy thy speech infuses into me, my lord, where every good thing doth begin and end. Thou seest as I see it, the more grateful is to me in this too hold I dear, that gazing upon God thou discern it. Glad hast thou make me, so make clear to me, since speaking thou hast stirred up to doubt, how from sweet seed can bitter issue forth. This I to him, and he to me. If I can show thee a truth to what thou askest, thou face will hold as thou dost. Thy face thou'lt hold as thou dost hold thy back. The good, which all the realm thou art ascending turns and contents, maketh its province to be a power within these bodies vast. And not alone the natures are foreseen, within the mind that in itself is perfect, but they together within their preservation. For whatsoever thing this bow shoots forth, falls, foreordained unto an end foreseen, even as a shaft directed to its mark. If that were not, the heaven which thou dost walk would in such manner its effects produce, that they no longer would be arts, but ruins. This cannot be if the intelligences that keep these stars in motion are not maimed, and maimed the first that has not made them perfect. Wilt thou this truth have clearer made to thee? And I, not so, for 'tis impossible that nature tire, I see, in what is needful. Whence he again, now say, would it be worse for men on earth were they not citizens? Yes, I replied, and here I ask no reason. And can they be so if below they live not, diversely into offices diverse? No, if your master writeth well for you. So came he with deductions to this point. Then he concluded, therefore it behooves the roots of your effects to be diverse. Hence, one is Solon born, another Xerxes, another Melchizedek, and another he who, flying through the air, his son did lose. Revolving nature, which a signet is to mortal wax, doth practice well her art, but not one end distinguished from another. Thence happens it that Esau differeth in seed from Jacob, and Quirinius comes from sire so vile that he is given to Mars. A generated nature in its own way, would always make like its progenitors, if province divine were not triumphant. Now, that which was behind thee is before thee, but that thou know that I with thee am pleased, with a corollary I will mantle thee. Evermore nature, if it fortune find discordant with it, like unto each other seed, out of its region make evil thrift. And if the world below would fix its mind on the foundation which is laid by nature, pursuing that would have the people good. But you unto religion wrench aside him who was born to gird him with the sword, and make a king of him who is for sermons. Therefore your footsteps wander from the road. And so ends Canto 8. We're only going to do up to 10, not 11. I was doing math. Oh, what we have here is physics, right? Things will continue in the way in which they are going unless they are acted upon. It's also part of the eight rules of creation, or eight laws of creation. There's a reason why they are a little bit different than each other. Things will continue to go along as things do, and the variation itself being the meaning of life, variation must happen. Right? The whole point is to have different experiences, to be different people, right? If we were all the same, it would be no use. There would be no value gained in that. But we each have a slightly different take on even the same circumstances. And so we therefore have slightly different experiences for God. I also believe that there's an alternate timeline, right? That I am on this one particular timeline and this one is mine. But there are others in which I am NPCs in other people's lives. There are others in which my life took a completely different turn and things are not the same as they are here. For me, that is the same concept as a man will never enter the river, the same river twice, because both the man and the river are different. It's a different experience no matter which way you go on the path. My soul, the one that is making the decision, has chosen this particular path. This seems to be what is mostly implied here. Right? You can't say it straight out, but the differential experience is the point of the experience. Canto 9. Beautiful Clements. After that, thy Charles had me enlightened. He narrated to me the treacheries his seed should undergo, but said, be still and let the years roll round, so I can only say that lamentation legitimate shall follow on your wrongs. And of that holy light the life already had to the sun which fills it turned again, as to that good which for each thing sufficeth. Ah, souls deceived and creatures impious, who from such good do turn away your hearts, directing upon vanity your foreheads. And now, behold, another of those splendors approached me, and its will to pleasure me, it signified by brightening outwardly. The eyes of Beatrice that fastened were upon me as before, of dear assent, to my desire assurance gave to me. Ah, bring swift compensation to my wish, thou blessed spirit, I said, and give me proof that what I think in thee I can reflect. Whereat the light that still was new to me, out of its depths whence it before was singing, as one delighted to do good, continued. Within that region of the land depraved of Italy, that lies between Rialto and fountainheads of Brenta and Piave, rises a hill, and mounts not very high, wherefrom descended formerly a torch, that made upon that region great assault. Out of one root were born both I and it. Conisia was I called, and here I shine, because the splendor of this star overcame me. But gladly to myself the cause I pardon of my allotment, and it does not grieve me, which would perhaps seem strong unto your vulgar. Of this so lucent and precious jewel, which of our heaven is nearest unto me, great fame remained, and ere it die away, this 100th year shall yet quintupled be. See if man ought to make him excellent, so that another life the first may leave. And thus thinks not that the present multitude shut in by a dige and tagliamento, nor yet for being scourged is penitent. But soon 'twill be that Padua in the marshes will change the water that Vicenza bathed, because the folk are stubborn against duty. And where the Sale and Cagnano join, one lordeth it, and goes with lofty head, for catching whom even now the net is making. Feltro, moreover, of her impious pastors shall weep the crime, which shall so monstrous be, that for the like none ever entered Malta. Ample exceedingly would be the vat, that of Ferrarese could hold the blood, and weary who should weigh it ounce by ounce. Of which this courteous priest shall make a gift, to show himself a partisan, and such gifts will to the living of the land conform. Above us there are mirrors, thrones you call them, from which shines out unto us God Judicant, so that this utterance seems good to us. Here it was silent, and it had the semblance of being turned elsewhither, by the will of which it entered as it was before. The other joy, already known to me, became a thing transplendent in my sight, as a fine ruby smitten by the sun. Through joy, effulgence is acquired above, and here a smile, but down below the shade outwardly darkens as the mind is sad. God seeth all things, and in him, blessed Spirit, thy sight is, said I, so that never will of his can possibly from thee be hidden. Thy voice, then, that forever makes the heavens glad, with the singing of those holy fires which of their 6 wings make themselves a cow. Wherefore does it not satisfy my longings? Indeed, I would not wait thy questioning if I in thee were as thou art in me. The greatest of the valleys where the water expands itself, for with its words began, that sea, accepted, which the earth engarlands, between discordant shores against the sun, extends so far that it meridian makes, where it was wont before to make the horizon. I was a dweller on that valley's shore, twixt Ebro and Magra, that with journey short doth from the Tuscan part of the Genoese. With the same sunset and same sunrise nearly sit Bugia, and the city whence I was, that with its blood once made the harbor hot. Folco, that people called me unto whom my name was known, and now with me this heaven imprints itself as I did once with it. For more the daughter of Belus never burned, offending both Sitius and Crucia, than I, so long as it became my locks, nor yet that Rodophian, who deluded was by Demophoon, nor yet Alcides, when Iole he in his heart had locked. Yet here is no repenting, but we smile, not at the fault which comes not back to mind, but at the power which ordered and foresaw. Here we behold the art that doth adorn with such affection, and the good discover whereby the world above turns that below. But that thou, wholly satisfied, may bear thy wishes hence, from which in this sphere are born, still farther to proceed behoveth me. Thou fain wouldst know who is within this light that here beside me thus is scintillating, even as a sunbeam in the limpid water. Then know thou that within there is at rest Rahab, and being to our order joined, with her in its supremest grade is sealed, into this heaven where ends the shadowy cone cast by your world. Before all the other souls, first of Christ's triumph was she taken up. Full meet it was to leave her in some heaven, even as a palm of the high victory, which he acquired with one palm and the other, because she favored the first glorious deed of Joshua upon the Holy Land, that little stirs the memory of the Pope. Thy city, which an offshoot of is of him, who first upon his Maker turned his back, and whose ambition is so sorely wept, brings forth and scatters the accursed flower, which both the sheep and lambs hath led astray, since it has turned the shepherd to a wolf. For this the Evangel and the mighty doctors are derelict, and only the decretals so study that it shows upon their margins. On this are the Pope and Cardinals intent. Their meditations reach not Nazareth, there where his pinions Gabriel unfolded, but Vatican, and the other parts elect of Rome, which have a cemetery been unto the soldiery that followed Peter, shall soon be free from this adultery. And so ends Canto 9, and this was a treatise on repentance and not having repentance, and rejoicing in repentance, and pretty much just surrounding itself with repentance. And talking about the fact that they lost the the Crusades, right? Like they freed Europe, but they lost Jerusalem, and that's what he's talking about at the end. Paradiso, Canto 10. Looking into his Son with all the love which each of them eternally breathes forth, the primal and unutterable power, whatever before the mind or eye revolves, with so much order made, there can be none who this beholds without enjoying him. Lift up then, reader, to the lofty wheels, with me thy vision straight unto that part where the one motion on the other strikes. And there begin to contemplate with joy that master's art, who in himself so loves it that never doth his eye depart from therefrom. Behold, how from that point goes branching off the oblique circle, which conveys the planets, to satisfy the world that calls upon them. And if their pathway were not thus inflected, much virtue in the heaven would be in vain, and almost every power below here dead. And if from the straight line distant more or less were the departure, much would wanting be above and underneath of mundane order. Remain now, reader, still upon thy bench, in thought, pursuing that which is foretasted. If thou wouldst jocund be instead of weary, I've set before thee, henceforth feed thyself, for to diverteth all my care, that theme thereof I have been made the scribe. The greatest of the ministers of nature, who, with the powers of heaven the world imprints, and measures with his light the time for us, with that part which above is called to mind conjoined, along the spirals was revolving, where each time earlier he presents himself. And I was with him, but of the ascending I was not conscious, saving as a man. Of a first thought is conscience, here it come. And Beatrice, she who is seen to pass from good to better, and so suddenly expressed that not by time her action is expressed. How lucid in herself must she have been, and what was in the sun wherein I entered, apparent not by color but by light. I, though I call on genius, art, and practice, cannot so tell that it could be imagined. Believe one can, and let him long to see it. And if our fantasies too lowly are, for altitude so great, it is no marvel, since over the sun was never eye could go. Such in this place was the fourth family of the High Father who forever sates it, showing how he breathes forth and how begets. And Beatrice began, give thanks unto the Son of Angels, who to this sensible one has raised thee by his grace. Never was heart of mortal so disposed to worship, nor to give itself to God with all its gratitude was it so ready, as at those words did I myself become, that all my love was so absorbed in him, that in oblivion Beatrice was eclipsed. Nor this displeased her, but she smiled at it, so that the splendor of her laughing eyes my single mind on many things divided. Lights, many saw I, vivid and triumphant, make us a centre and themselves a circle, more sweet in voice than luminous in aspect. Thus, girt about the daughter of Latona, we sometimes see when pregnant is the air, so that it holds the thread which makes hers own. Within the court of heaven, whence I return, are many jewels found, so fair and precious they cannot be transported from the realm. And of them was the singing of those lights, who takes not wings that he may fly up thither, the tidings thence may from the dumb await. As soon as singing thus those burning suns had round about us whirled themselves 3 times, like unto stars neighboring the steadfast poles. Ladies they seem, not from the dance released, but who stop short, in silence, listening till they have gathered the new melody. And within one I heard beginning, when the radiance of grace, by which is kindled true love, and which thereafter grows by loving, within thee multiplied is so resplendent that it conducts thee upward by that stair where without reascending none descends, who should deny the wine out of his vial unto thy thirst, in liberty were not, except as water which descends not seaward. Fain wouldst thou know which plants is enflowered this garland that encircles with delight the lady fair who makes thee strong for heaven. Of the lambs was I of the holy flock, which Dominic conducteth by a road, where well one fattens if he strayeth not. He who is nearest to me on the right my brother and master was, and he, Albertus, is of Cologne, I, Thomas, of Aquinium. If thou of all the others wouldst be certain, follow behind my speaking with thy sight, upward, along the blessed garland turning. That next effulgence issues from the smile of Gratian, who assisted both the courts in such wise that it pleased in paradise. The other which nearby adorns our choir, that Peter, was who, even as the poor widow offered his treasure unto holy church. The fifth light that among us is the fairest, breathes forth from such a love that all the world below is greedy to learn the tidings of it. Within it is the lofty mind, where knowledge so deep was put that if the true be true, the sea so much there never rose a second. Thou seest next the lustre of that taper which in the flesh below looked most within the angelic nature and its ministry. Within that other little light is smiling the advocate of the Christian centuries, out of whose rhetoric Augustine was furnished. Now, if thou trainest thy mind's eye along from light to light, pursuant of my praise, with thirst already of the eighth thou waitest. By seeing every good therein exalts the sainted soul, which the fallacious world makes manifest to him who listeneth well. The body, whence 'twas hunted forth, is lying down in ciel de rue, and from martyrdom and banishment it came unto this peace. See, farther onward, flame the burning breath of Isidore, of Beda, of Richard, who was in contemplation more than man. This, whence to me returneth thy regard, the light is of a spirit unto whom, in his grave meditations, death seems slow. It is the light eternal of Sigier, who, reading lectures in the street of straw, did syllogize invidious verities. Then, as horologe that calleth us, what time the bride of God is rising up, with matins to her spouse, that he may love her, wherein one part the other draws and urges, ting ting, resounding with so sweet a note that swells with love the spirit well disposed. Thus I beheld the glorious wheel move round, and render voice to voice in modulation, and sweetness that cannot be comprehended, excepting there where joy is made eternal. And so ends Canto 10, and we are going to begin the wrap-up. And this one is interesting in that this one is conveying more information. This is talking about the heavens in a very literal way. This is talking about the progression of the equinoxes. This is talking about the way that the heavens rotate. It is talking about the trifold pattern of the heavens rotating, and giving the descriptions along the way. Now, they're not using Gemini and Taurus. They're using Peter and Thomas Aquinas. But you can bet that they had their astrological signs that fit with these things, right? And it moved in the correct way. And it tells you that if you follow it, you get the azimuth. So you should be able to pick from that if you have the key, right? I'm not an astrologer, right? I don't deal with the different sections of heaven. And I possibly will get into that at some point. I have several things that I used to not look at that I am looking at these days. So it is entirely possible that I will check out astrology and tarot and all of those things. And I know that's going to throw some people into a tizzy, but I don't really care. I'm on a different thing. And a lot of the things that you have been told were bad aren't. And so It's a thing. I'm at least going to check out some of the things. This was definitely a key, right? It just told you right in the beginning of this canto that, hey, this is a key. Like he announced it fairly clear. I have been told to tell you this knowledge. And so what followed after that was a way to follow the heavens and the sky in order to see things and do things. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up here. This seems to be like a good spot. We made 6, so it's good. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some different beliefs than most people and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I'm telling people about them. I don't do it on purpose, but I don't apologize for it because I am merely here to reveal the things that I have been told. I try not to engage on the things that I don't fully understand. I will point out the things that I do see. I will talk about the things that I disagree with and the things that I agree with, but I'm not going to try to read into things that I'm not positive about. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know if you like it. Give me a comment. If you don't, give me a comment. If it's respectful, it gets to stay up. If you really like what I'm doing here, hit me with the super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.